right, here we go. Episode 7 of Let It Rip. Today we're going to talk about abortion. Should be a hot topic. Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam in the CUNY TV studios in the shadow of the Empire State Building in New York City. Welcome to Let It Rip. Roe v. Wade is the law of the land and has been since the Supreme Court decision was handed down in 1973, allowing abortions in all 50 states. But increasingly, women's reproductive rights have been in danger, under attack. A number of states have moved to make it far more difficult for a woman to get an abortion. Now, some Republican-led states have passed so-called heartbeat laws, making abortions illegal after a detectable heartbeat. In some cases, these laws would kick in as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. It's often before a woman even knows that she's pregnant. And laws like the one in Alabama, which is the most restrictive, call for the doctor to face up to 99 years in prison if he or she performs an abortion. That's life in prison. Now, many of these laws were passed with an eye towards eventually challenging Roe v. Wade in the courts, with the hope that a conservative-leaning Supreme Court would revisit Roe and overturn it. The issue's become hotly contested and will be one of the defining issues in the next presidential race. Battle lines are drawn, and we have some of the people on the front lines here to dig deeper into the issue. Planned Parenthood's Chief of External Affairs, Christina Chang, is here, along with the Organizing and Innovation Manager at Girls for Gender Equity, Brittany Brathwaite. Welcome to Let It Rip.
Thanks for having us here.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. Missouri's another state that currently has only one clinic in the entire state providing abortions. It's run by Planned Parenthood. It could easily be shut down. I want to play a clip, and we'll talk on the other side. This is Missouri State Rep Nick Schroer.
Across the nation, we have been plagued with extreme states such as New York, Virginia, Illinois, to say the least, that are not only repealing any and all restrictions on abortion, some are even allowing for the murder of a child up to and even after the point they exit their mother's womb. Recently, a legislator in Alabama argued,
Members and guests, we will keep our conversations to a whisper or take them outside.
Reaction. Christina?
I have many reactions to that. I think that to call New York extremist is the pot calling the kettle black. It's in fact places like Missouri that is taking some of the most extreme positions on abortion, which is a safe, legal procedure. Abortion is health care, and they are trying to rip away access to that. They are spreading lies and heightening rhetoric, talking about abortion in ways that just flat out are untruths.
Brittany?
Yeah, I agree a lot with Christina. I feel like, to her point, abortion is healthcare. Abortion is a human right. And all people should have access to abortion. And so when we have people that make these egregious statements, many of them do not even walk through the world ever having to think about abortion and how that is going to play out in their own worlds and families. And so it's easy to make an extreme comment when your life is not determined. There's no determination around your life because you're not impacted by it at all. And so I don't find myself listening to those statements very much because those people do not look like me, don't sound like me, and don't live in the bodies that I live in.
Neither of you touched on the word murder.
Because abortion is not murder.
It's healthcare, plain and simple.
Let's listen to Senator Elizabeth Warren.
The woman can call on whomever she wants to. She can call on her partner. She can call on her family. She can call on her priest. She can call on her pastor. But the one thing I'm sure of is the government should not be in the middle of that decision.
What do you think about her reaction, what she's saying there?
I don't think anybody should be in the way of anyone's decision, right? The government, even the people that she listed, I think that it is the individual's decision about abortion or any other forms of healthcare they choose to access. And I think what's really important is that this is not new, right? The attack on abortion and people's bodily autonomy is not we're in an extreme time. We're seeing extreme things happen, but this is not new. And these attacks have looked a lot different, and we can talk about this for a long time, whether it's controlling people's bodily autonomy or subjecting people to forms of violence. That the attacks that we're seeing are they're new packaging, but they're not new attacks. They're just repackaged in really extreme ways. And so I agree, the government has no place in a woman's body, and also has no place in anyone's decision about what you do with your body.
You mentioned violence. What did you mean there?
I mean, so I think about abortion as, restricting access to abortion as a form of reproductive violence, which means that it attempts to control the autonomy that people have to make decisions about their bodies, their healthcare, their families, and their communities. And so we can think about abortion as a form of violence. We can also think about the murder of trans women as a form of violence that really, really creates reproductive injustice for ourselves and our communities. And it's when I frame it as a form of violence, because it really takes away a person's agency to make decisions about their lives. It's not simply just a topic. It's not just an issue. It's not just a thing that we can talk about when it comes to legislation. It impacts the day-to-day ways that we move through the world and is inextricably linked to everything that we do. And so I see that as violence, because you take away someone's agency and control to make decisions about anything. When we talk, and that's abortion falls into reproductive violence. And what we fight for every day at Girls for Gender Equity is reproductive justice.
Mm-hmm. When I look at some of this stuff, Christina, I think that it almost is as if they want to turn the clock back to like the 1950s.
In some respects, yes. I mean, I think it goes back to what Brittany was saying about just the fundamental ability to choose your own destiny, to find your own path, and to decide what that looks like. And so becoming a parent, if you want to, and how that affects your trajectory, is your decision and yours alone. And so that's fundamental. So you can talk about it in terms of turning the clock back in terms of women in the workforce, but it goes back more fundamentally than that. It's about taking away the rights of self-determination for half of the population.
One of the things that kind of strikes me is the fact that you have people who are against abortion and call that murder, but at the same time, they favor the death penalty. I'm going to play a clip right now. This is Barry Hovis of Missouri talking about the death penalty.
I know I heard earlier about the death penalty, how, we want to allow babies that we believe in pro-life, but then we will still do the death penalty. But there's a big exception when we're talking about innocent life and someone who's went out and purposely killed someone that would make them eligible for that death penalty.
To me, it just seems strange to use terms like murder and all that when you're talking about a person's health.
Yeah, I don't think that they are the same conversation. They just don't appear to be the same conversation to me. The use of the term, I mean, the rhetoric, right, has been created. It's a strategy, right? When you say things like murder, when you call a fetus a baby, things like that are years of planning, of strategic design to get people to think about abortion in a certain type of way, which is why those of us who are reproductive justice advocates and activists and pro-abortion really don't use those terms or even repeat them, because we know that they have been strategized to create language and rhetoric that is harmful to what the actual care is. Abortion is healthcare, period.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I would also put out there is that when you talk about comparing the death penalty and an abortion, I think that what is fundamental there is placing judgment. Right, and so talking about innocent life versus judging someone else's life, and I think that what we really want to be able to underscore here is that that the healthcare should not be judgmental. There shouldn't be any judgment in there. It should be about compassion. It should be about your well-being. It should be about having your right to make your own decision.
It's interesting. In reality, nearly 6 out of 10 Americans feel that abortion should be legal. So it's a small minority. But to me, it appears that what they have done, and I think that the history will prove this out, is that they've identified an issue and a certain block of people, and that's a block that politicians can get to vote for them. And so part of this is really steeped in not so much health care, but the fact that that's a voting block and it's political as well. What do you think about that?
I mean, abortion has been used as, I'm a black person who does organizing with black people. Abortion has been used for a long time as a wedge issue to divide very progressive communities who've always voted on progressive policies to divide a group of people, right? And so that, to your point, is one of the strategies that are being used as like, here, abortion, religion, let's throw this all in together. Why would you vote for this candidate if they believe this way? But my friend Renee Bracy Sherman always says that everyone loves someone that has had an abortion, right? 1 in 3 women have had an abortion in the United States. And so it's not uncommon that the people that are also against this have also had abortions. And the conversations also are also steeped in stigma and shame, and people are coming from a place, they figure out how to get people to come from a place of stigma and shame to shape that conversation. And so it's about voting blocks. It's about splitting people who love people that have had abortions and still will go out and vote another way, and they have done a good job. Well, never mind. I don't give them credit for doing anything, but they have been very, very strategic.
They've been effective.
They've been effective in creating divisions between communities, using abortion as a wedge issue, as an issue that people feel stigma and shame around, in order to get them to vote for less progressive policies and people.
You work very closely with a grassroots effort, people on the streets in your community. How, in fact, would young women that you work with, because they're young, be affected if they overturn Roe v. Wade and abortion was no longer legal?
Oh, they would. It would be terrible. It would be horrible. But I mean, young people that I work with already face barriers to abortion, right? We living in New York, there are lots of ways, and we're lucky to have a Planned Parenthood affiliate, Planned Parenthood of New York City, that has made abortion and other necessary healthcare services really affordable and accessible and compassionate to young people trying to access abortion. But it is very hard for young people to even identify a safe adult to talk to about having an abortion.
Christina, just real quick, the new restrictive laws, what is your take on those laws? How concerned are you about what's happening like in Louisiana, Missouri, Alabama?
We're absolutely concerned about that. I think that what we're seeing them do is deliberately pass unconstitutional laws, so that, as you said earlier in your opening, so that they are trying to provoke the Supreme Court to hear these cases in their hopes of overturning Roe v. Wade. And we've already seen what the world looks like in a pre-Roe era. We saw that women were dying. We saw that the only way to make the one true way of making abortion unsafe is to make it illegal and to make it inaccessible. And so when we see these bans being passed, when we see them continuing to move that line, we are going to move to a world where there's going to be have and have-nots. This is, just as Brittany said, abortion was always accessible to people of means. What this will do is actually impact folks who may not be able to have the resources and the wherewithal to be able to come to New York and get an abortion from Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Texas, all of these other states. And so by doing that, we have fundamentally taken away people's rights to self-determination. And that's fundamentally what they're trying to chip away at.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about politics, the presidential race and all of that, and how that all fits into this, okay? You're listening to Let It Rip. We'll be right back.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
2, 1.
All right, welcome back to Let It Rip. We're talking about a woman's right to choose, abortion today. And one of the things that really struck me is like how hotly the debate has been around this issue. When they were debating this in Alabama, it was just, as they say, off the hook. Let's take a quick listen right now to Bobby Singleton and what was going on with the legislature in Alabama before they passed that very restrictive law.
All those in favor say aye.
No.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Committee amendment is tabled. Senator Chambliss.
There was no motion. There was no motion.
There was a motion. He made a motion.
He didn't even make a motion, Mr. President.
Hold on, excuse me.
He did not make a motion.
He made a motion to table.
He did not make a motion. There was no motion from the other side.
He made a motion to table.
Senator. Heck no. He didn't even make a motion. He did not make a motion.
He made a motion to table.
What was the motion made?
The motion.
No motion was made. You just
excuse me, Senator Chambliss. You're recognized.
I don't care what the chair is about.
Thank you, Mr.
He
President.
did not make a motion.
In response to the number of abortions that have
No.
Wow. Okay, so that was a situation where maybe someone was trying to delay the vote just a little bit. Maybe they didn't want to have the vote, but that was something. What was your reaction when you saw all of this going on down in Alabama?
That doesn't sound like a debate to me at all. I think that that is purely political rhetoric.
I didn't hear a lot of women's voices in there either.
Not at all.
What do you think about that aspect of this whole issue? Do we have too many men making the decisions?
I think that we have people making decisions for experiences that they have no insight into at all. I think that we have, and that's why elections are so important. It's why we need to have people getting mobilized to vote for candidates that reflect their values and their views. I think here in New York State, we saw in 2018, for the first time, a New York State Senate that was that turned over to a pro-reproductive health majority, and in 2018. And with that, we saw the passage of the Reproductive Health Act that was signed into law January 2019. In that law, we enshrined the protections of Roe v. Wade here in New York State and expanded access to abortion. And so it's fundamental to be able to vote for leaders who are going to be reflective of the communities that they serve, what they need, what they want, and to be accountable to that. And so we're seeing that happening now, and I think not just for the benefit of New Yorkers, but unfortunately when you hear these clips from Alabama and from Missouri, potentially for people across the country.
One of the things that's kind of interesting about all this is that this is forcing those who are going to be running in the next election, who are running right now, to deal with this head on. Joe Biden, former vice president, had some real issues with this because of his record. Let's listen to him as he makes a reversal. He pivots on this issue.
I can't justify leaving millions of women without access to the care they need and the ability to exercise their constitutionally protected right. If I believe health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support an amendment that makes that right dependent on someone's zip code.
A complete reversal from where he had been before. He says that his religion had a lot to do with his position before. Good enough?
I think it's a step in the right direction. I think that what we're seeing here is a recognition of the barriers that have been placed up by politicians to prevent people, particularly communities of color, people with low income, people who do not have a voice, people who are disenfranchised, to be able to access the care that one might have if you were privileged and lived had means, and were able to choose whatever health care you wanted. And so I think what Biden was recognizing there was the Hyde Amendment, right, which was a bar on federal funding to cover abortion specifically. And by doing that, making it an exception for abortion when it's health care, just like any other procedure that one might be able to have, is taking away that right and that access to poor people across America. And I think that that's an important recognition, and that reversal is welcome. But it's not just enough to say that. You actually have to put into pieces to make that a reality, allow you to actually be able to exercise that right. So that means actually being able to support the expansion of health centers and that provide abortion. It means to reverse the stigma that is out there around abortion and people who choose that option for themselves for a variety of different reasons.
So to roll up their sleeves and do the work.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. How important do you think this issue will be in the 2020 presidential race? I'd like to hear from both of you on this.
Yeah, I mean, given the timing, I think that it is a thing, it's definitely an issue that people want to hear from the candidates on, right? It's everywhere. People are finally starting to talk about abortion. You can't open up a browser tab without seeing abortion in a headline. So it's definitely something that I think folks want to hear candidates on. Where do you stand on this issue? Where are you able to put resourcing towards this issue? How far along on it's not okay to just say I believe in it's not just enough to say I believe in abortion. I think people want to see exactly what that means and sort of operationalize the day-to-day, like healthcare, fair wages. It's a large issue. It's not just access to abortion means that there's a health center you can go to, right? There's a lot of things that come, creating safe communities, reversing trap laws. There's a whole host of issues connected to really receiving safe, affordable, accessible, and compassionate abortion care. And so I think that people are going to want to see where people land on this issue and how expansive their ideas and strategies are around creating abortion access for folks.
Christina, what do you think? You think it's a very important issue for this election? Do you think it's the defining issue?
I think that abortion is definitely going to be an important issue, but it's one issue among the many issues, because what we're seeing right now is a rollback of the advancements of rights for a whole range of people. We think about immigrants who come to this country. We think about people with low wages. We think about LGBT individuals, where there was an expansion and recognition of their rights and protection of those rights, and we're seeing a rollback. So I think that abortion plays into all of those different issues, because it's about fundamentally seeing our humanity and recognizing that and supporting those decisions. Most
of the candidates are taking on the issue head on. If you listen to them out on the campaign trail, they often address this issue. Let's take a listen to Kamala Harris right now out on the stump.
And let's also speak truth that this past week made clear. Women's access to reproductive health care is under attack, and we will not stand for it, and we will fight with everything we have.
How important is it that women are out front on this issue in this presidential race, that there are women who are candidates?
I think it's fundamental. You had asked, are there too many men making the decisions? And I think it goes back to the need to elect leaders who reflect their communities and their needs and wants. And so having more women representing districts and states across the country is really important. Having LGBT people representing their communities, having immigrants representing communities are all vitally important to be able to get the issues out there and to take some positive steps to protect them.
I agree. I mean, I work alongside middle schoolers, right, who identify as girls and gender nonconforming young people who are civically engaged and really interested in shaping a new politic, shaping a new world for us. They are equipped with the skills, and they have, if we give them the leadership roles that they deserve, they are more than capable to make decisions about this country and let alone this world. And it's so important. I have the honor and privilege of working alongside young people that are in those spaces, but it's such a privilege to get to witness what is really possible when we actually allow those who are most impacted by the issues to take the lead. And so I think that is what I want to see in this country, in this, this democracy that we're creating, is that people that are really deeply impacted by the issues we're talking about actually taking the lead on those issues.
Okay, let's talk, before we wrap up here, let's talk just a little bit about what each of your organizations are doing here in New York City. Christina?
I think that we talked a little bit about the Reproductive Health Act sort of opening the way for New York to really double down on our commitment and our mission to allow people to expand the access to sexual and reproductive health care here. And so at Planned Parenthood of New York City, we are really excited to be announcing a merger with 4 other affiliates across the state so that we can actually provide more care to more New Yorkers and really be able to build on the strengths of our affiliates. We are also also opening up our doors, offering evening hours. We're expanding transgender affirming care. We are really trying to expand access, and not just for New Yorkers. I was looking over at my notes and noted that in 2014, about 2% of our abortion patients came from out of state. This year already, 4% of our patients are coming from out of state. And so we are thinking through not just about how we can expand access to abortion or to healthcare services and sexually reproductive healthcare services for New Yorkers, but also now beyond, and really creating a safe haven for human rights right here in New York City.
Mm-hmm. Brittany?
Girls for Gender Equity is about 2 decades now, two decades old now, and we have been working really hard to empower young people to be able to make decisions about their own lives and to become leaders in their communities. And so some of the things that we are working on is creating the opportunity to remove the barriers that construct the freedom of young people being able to live self-determined lives. And that looks like expanding comprehensive sexuality education in schools. And so we can't really have a conversation about reproductive health access without talking about comprehensive sexuality education, which is not offered here in New York State in K through 12 and many, many locales across the country. And so we are mobilizing young people to be able to take action on getting comprehensive sexuality education here and across the country. We're also building leaders through the Young Women's Advisory Council across the state to have young women of color be able to be civically engaged and make decisions on their local levels about things that impact them, from healthcare to juvenile justice or injustice to the city that they want to live in. And so we're really working alongside young people to shape this country and shape the narratives that will go on and live on forever. And that's an honor and privilege to do that work.
Planned Parenthood's Christina Chang. Girls for Gender Equity, Brittany Brathwaite. I want to thank you both. You were great guests. Thanks for coming on Let It Rip.
Thank you.
We'll be back with some final thoughts. Now for some final thoughts. Abortion remains a hot-button issue for many. On the one side, the vast majority of women and men support a woman's right to choose, to have control over their bodies and not go back to the days of back-alley abortions and the dangerous practices that existed before abortion became legal for all in 1973. Supporters are vocal and politically organized, and those wanting their votes in 2020 will have to demonstrate their support for abortion rights. Increasingly, this group is saying that this is one of the most important issues for them. On the other side, well, the numbers aren't as large, but they are emboldened by the president's picks for the Supreme Court and the majority, the conservative majority they hold there. And they're passionate about protecting the unborn. They frame the issue as taking a life and have been working for decades to overturn Roe v. Wade. Politicians see this as a viable block of votes that can be harnessed for an election. Both sides are passionate about their positions, and when it comes down to the time to go to the polls, it may all come down to that passion and mobilization. Whether or not a woman continues to have the right to choose may well come down to which side can push a candidate with their beliefs across the finish line and into the White House. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Let It Rip.